Bermuda.
Thanks for staying with us. We're now joined on set by some members of the non-governmental organizations. We have Debbie Rivers from SCORS, Martha Dismont from the Family Center, and of course Kelly Hunt from the Coalition for the Protection of Children. Ladies, thank you for being here with us tonight. I want to start with you, Martha. We live in a small community where word of situations like this can go abroad very quickly, very easily. What are some of the effects that we see on the families of victims of this crime?
Well, I guess the first thing I want to say is we're watching this scene where we're hearing more about sexual abuse, or certainly child abuse, that there's a lot of work going on to get families to recognize what's happening and then to report. And therefore, you know, in Bermuda, we're going to see more reporting. I know you asked a question earlier about whether or not there's more reporting or there's just more awareness. I think it's a combination. If we look at the cases over the past couple of years that we've seen in the court, most of those cases are of abuse that it has been alleged in the last couple of years. So that would suggest more. I actually think that, unfortunately, with families where this has occurred years ago, that there are still many families that have said very little or nothing. Consequently, this is about greater awareness, and I just think we're going to see more of it. So it has an impact, and it has an impact for us as a community because it's a very ugly side of a hurting population. And therefore, how do we actually manage it as a community in families, etc.? And we're a small community. We know each other, and so you look at someone very differently. How do you manage that? And so it's having some impact. And I think, unfortunately, with these kinds of things, it may be the tip of the iceberg because we have a bit of a silence culture. We don't talk about these things, and as SCORS has rightfully brought out, and I know Debbie will talk about, we must bring these things out. We've got to cleanse, and when you're cleansing, it doesn't look pretty. So it's having some impact for sure.
Are we meeting the needs of the families of victims?
Well, that becomes our job in terms of, I appreciate what Department for Child and Family Services is doing, what the police are vigilantly doing, but now we have to provide resources and support and counseling and you know, it's the dealing with the effects from trauma, an emotional situation, you know, a situation that's occurred that has affected you emotionally in a very negative way. So we are developing resources for dealing with this kind of trauma, and thank goodness for SCORS for their bringing more awareness, and I know the coalition as well is helping to refer parents or work with parents. Yes, the resources are being developed as we begin to cleanse.
Kelly or Debbie, either one of you can answer this. What are some of the behaviors that we should look out for when adults are with children?
Well, I would say, first of all, I want to say it's an adult's responsibility to protect children. So I just want to make that really clear. I think that we have to be diligent in one-on-one situations. 80% of sexual abuse occurs in a one adult, one child situation. And so what we're trying to do is reduce the risk, minimize the opportunity. There are a lot of steps that we teach in our training on protecting children. One is we have to learn the facts of what sexual abuse is. So sexual abuse is considered a criminal act, and it's when an adult inappropriately touches a child's private parts, their genitals, their mouth, or inappropriately views without touching. It can also be an adult or an older child asking another child to inappropriately touch or view those same parts. So once you learn the facts and you understand it, I think then you can start to begin to minimize the opportunity. One thing that we're advocating is eliminating or reducing isolated one-on-one situations. So that is a real great tool to do to try to just put in like a rule of 3 if you're in an organization, to think about how you can look at your organization and scan those isolated areas. So that reduces the risk. So we're minimizing the opportunity. Then I think what's another important step is we have to talk about it. We have to talk about sexual abuse. We have to talk to our children about boundaries, about their bodies, about what is appropriate and what's inappropriate, and to give them a voice to talk about it, to be able to say, you can come and tell me anything. And your body is special. Nobody should be touching you in those areas. And also holding each other accountable when we're in group group sessions, in a family session, or just to be able to hold each other accountable and say, you know what, I think that's inappropriate, I think that language is inappropriate, and to put boundaries up. And I think that's really important when we learn one of the steps in our training, which is talking about it. And then I think we do have to recognize the signs and know what the signs are to protect children from further harm. I think we have to realize that when an adult is more interested in a child than an adult, so spending lots and lots of time with children instead of other adults, I think that's a red flag. I think we need to look at that. I think that if you have a teacher who's in a classroom with a locked door, that's a red flag. We have to look at that. Teachers shouldn't be in classrooms with locked doors. I think we need to scan areas. I also think that it's very necessary that we have code of conducts in organizations so that others know what's expected. And that's why I think the training is really important, because it talks about how we do need to develop code of conducts, and we have to hold people accountable to that. I think we also have to react responsibly when sexual abuse does come in, is disclosed or suspected. I think that first of all, children have to know that it's not their fault. They've done nothing wrong. Children have to know that they're believed and that you're going to do everything to help them. I don't think we can make false promises, but I think the first thing we need to do is protect them from that perpetrator. We have to remove them from the harm, because children become adults, and hurt children and wounded children will become wounded adults. And if we don't prevent it and stop this, we're just going to have hurt people hurting people, which we have. Sexual abuse has been in this country for generations. It's just now what we're discovering as we're doing the training is adults are now feeling empowered to tell their story and to understand why they are the way they are, why they have certain habits and pain and afflictions that they do, because they haven't been able to talk about it. And I think the training teaches them that we can talk about it. We do have to have these conversations about sex and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate.
That was going to be one of the questions I was going to ask Kelly, in terms of what are some of the long-term impacts or effects of child sexual abuse?
Well, firstly, I want to, say that with this sort of influx of cases that we're seeing, there's been this call to action, and so this kind of forum is really encouraging to, I think, all of us, that we can work together and collaborate on, how we can make our children feel safer and grow up in a more nurturing and safer environment. In terms of long-term effects, it's multifaceted. There are, I guess the average age that people start to come to terms with some childhood traumas is actually 30 years old, and that's when people begin to really reflect on what's transpired, and that's why we don't always see people coming forward, and why statistics are difficult to really solidify with sexual abuse. So, there are many, and they're long-term, and they affect relationships, they affect employment, they affect, obviously, parenting, pretty much you name it, I think.
Affects everything.
Yeah, so it's definitely an issue that we all need to really come together as a community and address, and I'm encouraged by the fact that we're doing that. So.
Can a child who falls victim to this truly ever recover? Can therapy help a child recover from this?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think healing comes in a lot of forms. It can be psychological counseling, it can be spiritual healing. I think the most important thing is that they have to hold on to hope that this scar will heal. That's the most important thing. You have to cling to hope. And you also have to embrace the fact that what happened shouldn't have happened. It was wrong. And you have to accept that it wasn't your fault. And you have to know that, the sexual abuse of children, that's not love. Love is not sexual abuse. And your innocence is stolen.
No, you go ahead. I was going to say, and you'll find that it depends on the circumstance in which it occurred, that individuals will find themselves frightened by going into a situation like that again. But if they are able to go into a situation like that again, and they're cared for and nurtured, and they find it to be a healthy environment, that starts to heal them.
Absolutely. And children are extremely resilient. So early intervention is really, really key and important. Identifying children that are at risk or that are you know, acting out or you know, disengaging or what have you. It's so important, because the earlier that we can, you know, stop this from happening, absolutely there's extreme, you know, success as far as their future. and
So
what
how
can
does the
happen.
healing process begin for victims of this crime?
The first thing is to know it wasn't their fault. I think that's so important, to know that what happened to them shouldn't have happened. I think that's crucial. They did nothing to cause it. Because perpetrators, sadly, make children feel like they asked for it. It's their fault. I've heard many victims say, you know, he told me that I liked it, and felt guilty about that. And so there's guilt and there's shame and there's rejection, you know. Victims are confused. Wait, this is supposed to be somebody who loves me, because remember, if 90% occurs by someone you know, love, or trust, then they're confused by, why is this person who's supposed to love me or protect me or teach me or is hurting me? So, and they know it's wrong. Children know something doesn't feel right. And so, so I think that's the, you know, that's the first thing is, no, it shouldn't have happened. It wasn't your fault. You did nothing wrong. And I think that's the first thing, to know that they're validated. Because I think that's what they live with, is this secret of shame and guilt. What did I do to cause this? Why me? Why are they saying it's my fault? And I think once, and that's what we're finding in our trainings with adults who have come forward, are just saying, gosh, now I realize it wasn't my fault. Yeah, it did feel good and I was confused. Sex feels good, and a child doesn't understand that, and they thought they asked for it. The other thing that is really important, Gary, is being believed.
Right.
I've heard so many victims tell me that they told, and I heard one victim say, I told and I was asked what was I wearing. You know, an outfit is never an invitation for anybody to touch a child. And so the first thing we have to know is they have to be believed. And sometimes a person's reaction to it, to their disclosure, can be just as hurtful as the abuse itself. So especially when a child isn't believed.
So what are some of the symptoms that a parent should look for in terms of a child displaying or showing symptoms of having been sexually abused?
Well, I think it's also important to point out that children will test the waters. They do want to, like Debbie was saying, they do know that something is wrong, so they want to find out if, you know, there's a trusted adult that will listen to them. So they might, you know, suggest certain things or say something. And so, you know, your panel before talked about communicating with your children, being really involved in their activities, knowing who they're with and what they're doing, talking to them about the fact that it's okay to say no to an adult. I think, you know, we live in a culture where we're kind of taught to, you know, not really speak up sometimes, but it's really, it's integral that we teach our children to have a certain respect for their body, and that it's absolutely okay to say no. This is my space, and even though.
But based on what we heard from Mark and Maureen a little while ago, that culture, if I can call it that, is changing. People are willing to speak up now because they feel empowered.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's by empowering our children, saying, you know, one thing that we're trying to communicate in our trainings is the affection a child gives should always be their choice. It's okay to say no. We live in a community, I know in our family, and you know, going back generations, we were forced to give hugs and kisses at a family event and say goodbye and kiss them, and we're trying to get families to say no. If a child doesn't want to display affection, it's okay. I mean, I'm an affectionate person. I love to give affection, but I always make sure that the child, it's their choice to give me affection. You know, and to, you know, one of the other things that I think we really need to do is teach children the proper body parts. Let's start calling body parts what they are, because that is a real area where sex offenders will take advantage of that, you know. And if you have different names for different body parts, how are children ever really to, you know, disclose what's happening to them if they don't have the proper names to use what's happening, you know, what's happening to their body. So I think that's important. But I think in terms of signs and symptoms, it's really depending on the age. So I think when you see younger children who don't want a diaper or don't want you to touch them down there, I think, you know, need to look out for those signs, or if they're imitating other sexual behaviors that you haven't taught them that, they've obviously learned that from somewhere else, I think that's a red flag to start asking some questions. I think you hear only from victims, we know this, you know, numbing their pain with alcohol or drugs or any other form of an addiction, food disorder, you know, cutting themselves, self-harm, sex, you know, all sorts of things that people are doing to just ease their pain and cover it up because they have no other way, because they're not saying it, they're not revealing it, so they have to soothe themselves in another form.
Do economics play a role in this at all?
I think it's minor, to be honest. It really just depends on the individual, because there is this piece about what's the adult's responsibility in this. And yes, keep your child out of one-on-one isolated situations for long periods, you know, behind closed doors with you know, locked doors, etc. There are people who are struggling economically, and they go to their source of need. To, you know, some people will eat a lot of food, other people will drink, other people will take drugs, some people resort to, you know, this sort of very ugly way of dealing with their emotions, and potentially it's a generational piece for them, so they are resorting to that even if they've gone through counseling. So economics could play a part into it. If somebody gets into a survival mode and they're trying to numb their own pain. So it's a difficult one. We have to get out of this economic situation regardless, because it's causing all sorts of problems from all the addictions that are out there. But I think we also have to get to a more healthy environment in terms of how adults interact, not only with children, but with each other. And you know, as peers, we have to say what behavior is acceptable, what is not. As you mentioned, Debbie, this whole concept of, well, they were wearing a certain kind of dress. What does that mean to us as a community when people are dressing a certain way? What is the definition of that for us as a community? And what's okay and what's not okay? I think there are some adults who have probably either been on the verge or probably have moved down that road a little bit in inappropriate touching, because we have sort of an anything goes environment a little bit here, and I think we have to take some responsibility for that as adults and say these things are completely unacceptable.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, the economic reason should never be an adult to choose another adult over a child. So I know that that happens sometimes, and in homes where the perpetrator is the breadwinner.
That is what I was actually...
Yeah, and I think that happens, but let me just say, children are not many adults. There's nobody there to help them.
That's what I said.
So that can never be an excuse. Reach out to somebody. Find out where you can get the money to help with your rent. Find an answer, but do not keep a child in harm and leave that child just for economic reasons.
Yeah, if anything, it's the unattended child, because the parent has to, you know, take on another job, and so that, if there is a correlation, that is it. But I think, as we said in the beginning, there is no, you know, profile of a perpetrator or a sex offender. It's any and everybody that you could essentially imagine. So it's really important that is said, you know.
Yeah, a sex offender can be white, black, rich, poor, male, female, 25% are women. It can be an OBA member, a PLP member. You know, you could live in Middletown or Tuckerstown. Sexual abuse does not discriminate whether you're a victim or a perpetrator. It does not discriminate.
Have you had people coming to the Family Center for assistance in dealing with matters of this nature, in terms of seeking the psychological care that people are going to need to deal with this issue? And again, do economics play a role in this? Because not everybody can afford right now to pay the fees that a psychologist might ask.
But so first of all, it's important to note that there are no costs to attend Family Center services.
Yes.
We don't charge except to government. Because they should be paying. But anyway, so there is no cost to get the help you need. We have very few direct referrals with regard to sexual abuse unless it comes from government, because it's a situation. We actually find out that something like that might have occurred for some other referral, because again, we are a culture of silence and we don't talk about those things, but they're often the reason why Johnny is acting out, or Susie is very, very sad and depressed, or there's a self-harm. So the referrals that we get do not come directly for that. There may be a few, but there are few and far between, unless you dig a little bit and discover why Susie is very upset.
Do we need to be putting more resources into addressing this problem? Or are there sufficient resources already being spent on it?
Oh, I don't think there's ever sufficient resources
Yeah.
at this point. We're just learning the scope of the problem. I think Mark earlier, the police officer, absolutely identified the numbers we're probably dealing with, and we're still learning about the scope. So I think more resources must be put in place, and we're learning about the scope.
What can an individual do to learn more about how to prevent child sexual abuse? Apart from the Googling, someone wants to actually walk into an office, sit with someone, discuss their problem with them, and have plausible answers, plausible solutions.
Of course, what I'm going to say on the face of SCARS is please come and do the training. We have trained 2,431 adults in Bermuda in our training. And we hope to train every adult in Bermuda to learn this message, to learn, because it's important. But, prevention is key, because by the time, the police, Child and Family Services, the helping agencies get involved, that scar has formed. That scar is there. And so that's why prevention is key, and our training is key. And we continue to raise money in the community so nobody has to pay for this training. Because there's no excuse, there should be no excuse not to learn how to protect children from sexual abuse. Sexual abuse can be the deepest pain because it's inflicted very, very early. And the wounds of sexual abuse are the slowest to heal. And so I would say sign up for our training. We offer our training once a month at the Argus group. Our next one is February 21st, but that class is full. After that, it's March 21st and then April 18th. On our website, if you go on our website, scarsbermuda.com, and click on the tab for training, you'll see all the dates. We also bring this training to organizations. So we'll bring the training to you. We have 25 volunteer facilitators, including Kelly, as SCARS facilitating this training, because this training is a Darkness to Light Stewards of Children training. We brought it from the U.S. We cannot train the trainer, so we bring Darkness to Light in every year to train more facilitators to get this training into the community. We also provide a SAFE program. SCARS is the acronym for SCARS Arms Families Through Education. We've been to 33 schools with our SAFE presentation. Our SAFE presentation is a 1-hour presentation that we bring to organizations. And it's a toolkit of information. So what do you need to know and teach your children? Start early and talk often. What are the appropriate behaviors to look out for? What are the warning signs? What do you have to ask organizations before you drop your children off about sex? Do the teachers or that camp counselors, do they do sexual abuse prevention? How do they monitor one adult, one child situations? Do they do background checks? Do they do reference checks? Do they have a code of conduct? So we're getting parents to start asking organizations those questions. And so that is a 1-hour presentation. It also involves a video documentary called Into the Light, talking about victims that have been abused and what this does, adult victims, and what this does to them. So safe or training.
How can people get in contact with SCARS?
info@scars.bm, training at scars.bm, Debbie, DEBI at scars.bm. Our telephone number is 297-2277. And we would love to come and do a training at your organization so that we can protect the children of Bermuda.
We're going to have to leave it there. I hope that this was an enlightening experience for you. We choose not to have the phones tonight because we didn't want to disrupt the discussion in any way at all. So let me say thank you, first of all, to Mark and Maureen, still here, they haven't left. Debbie Ray Rivers, Martha Dismont, Kelly Hunt, thank you all very much for sharing your expertise here with us tonight. Thank you for viewing.
Thank you for having us.
God
Thank you
bless
for
and
having
have a
us.
good night.
Let's Talk is a production of ZBM News 9.